One of the best aspects of Monster Hunter is the sheer variety of ways to play the game. This is all thanks to the various weapons and sheer amount of builds or sets that you can create. So I'm Darcblade with an Anti-Alatreon build for the Hunting Horn in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now the main purpose of an anti-build is to create a set that is made to counter a specific monster in the game. In this episode we're looking at countering Alatreon, providing hunters with two builds to take on the blazing black dragon, one safe, one risky. The Hunting Horn is a surprisingly effective weapon to take on Alatreon, so long as you know the monster's move patterns. This is all thanks to the Hunting Horn's echo attacks, enabling the Hunting Horn, which is normally a slow attacking weapon, to deal out a lot of elemental damage, making it perfect for taking on Alatreon. Now with the Hunting Horn, normally I go for Hunting Horn builds that are built around certain melodies and songs. However, in the case of these builds, they are built around elemental damage, so the songs are not the greatest with these builds. So the first build is the risky Anti-Alatreon Hunting Horn build. This build makes use of the entire Safi'jiiva armor set, which gives us a ton of DPS, but at the cost of draining our health and leaving us at risk, hence the name. So for this build you'll need the Safi Crested Crown Beta, Safi Crested Chest Beta, Van Braces Beta, Belt Beta and Boots Beta. I'm also using a Frost Charm 5 as we're using an ice weapon. Of course if you were using a different weapon with a different element, you would replace the Frost Charm to match whatever new element you are using. And for my weapon I'm using the Kiar Pipe Stream. This has a health regen augmentation, elemental up augmentation, and as for the custom upgrades, I've gone for increasing the weapon's elemental damage. As for the specialist tools, these are down to personal preference. Now when it comes to the jewels, you've got a fair few to play around with. First of all, I've gone for Tenderizer jewels to max out weakness exploit. I've then gone for Challenger jewels for the agitator skill, Vitality jewels for health boost, a Frost jewel to max out the ice attack skill. Of course, like I said, if you were using a different weapon with a different element, you would replace the Frost jewel to match whatever new element you were using. I've then gone for Resistor jewels for blight resistance, Evasion jewels to max out Evade window, Sonorous jewel for Horn Maestro, and a Sharp jewel. And then finally the jewels on the mantles, I've simply gone for Expert and Protection jewels. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health and 150 stamina. When you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables, you'll have a raw attack of 1201 with a decent chunk of white sharpness. You have 50% base affinity, which can be 100%, especially when you're taking into account skills like weakness exploit and agitator. You have an ice rating of 1180. This rating is taken with the Safi'jiiva set bonus, True Dragon Vein Awakening, in effect. And when it comes to the songs, this horn doesn't really have many useful ones. The two main useful ones that I tend to play when using this weapon is the self-improvement melody as well as the defense up melody. And then finally, when it comes to your defense, you have an okay defense rating of 1081. That's strong against every element except for dragon. So as for the skills, first of all you have Ice Attack at level 6, increasing the ice rating and damage of this build. Of course, as I've mentioned with the Frost Charm and the Frost Jewel, if you were using a different weapon with a different element, you would replace Ice Attack level 6 to match whatever new element you were using. You've got Agitator at level 5. Agitator is a wonderful skill in Iceborne. It's a buff that kicks in whenever a monster becomes enraged, increasing our raw attack as well as affinity. And as you can easily control when a monster becomes enraged thanks to flint shots, it's definitely a useful skill in the game. You have Evade window level 5, increasing our invulnerability frames when we perform evasions and dodges and such. You have health boost level 3, allowing our health to get to that maximum of 200. You have blight resistance level 3, allowing us to ignore all elemental blights, which is very handy against Alatreon and means that we don't have to take null berries on the hunt. You have crit boost level 3. Crit boost is a skill that increases the damage of our attacks when they crit a monster, but it only applies to the raw portion of our attack. It doesn't do anything for the elemental portion. Anyway, you have Weakness Exploit level 3. Weakness Exploit is a skill that increases our affinity so long as we're attacking monster weak points. And should these weak points be tenderized through Clutch Claw attacks first, then this increase to our affinity is even greater. Weakness Exploit at level 3 can provide us potentially 50% extra affinity. You have Horn Maestro level 2, increasing the duration of the songs we play with the Hunting Horn. You have Protective Polish level 1. Protective Polish is a useful skill that allows us to put a protective coating over our sharpness gauge, preventing any sharpness loss for a small duration of time after we sharpen our weapon. And then finally you have Critical Element level 1. Critical Element is like Critical Boost. It basically increases the elemental portion of our attacks when our attacks crit a monster. And then finally for the mantles you have two skills. First of all is Critical Eye level 2. This is pretty much optional. Critical Eye basically increases the base affinity of this build. And finally you'll have Divine Blessing at level 2, which gives us a chance of taking reduced damage when we take a hit from a monster. So as for the set bonus, you only have one of them, which is the Safi'jiiva seal, True Dragon Vein Awakening, which is a buff that kicks in whenever we have our weapon drawn. With our weapon drawn, we'll gain 40% base affinity as well as an increase to our elemental rating. We would also get an increase to our ailment rating should we be using an ailment weapon, but we're not, so you can ignore that part. But there is a downside to this. With every swing of the weapon, it will drain our health, leaving a portion of red health on our health bar. Red health on our health bar pretty much counts as health lost, so if we take a hit from a monster and we've got a large portion of red health, it means that we can potentially cart. However, should we continuously attack a monster, then after enough consecutive attacks, then the True Dragon Vein Awakening will initiate a heal, healing that red health. So as long as you don't get hit in between, it's quite a useful but risky skill. But there we have it, that is the risky Anti-Alatreon build I tend to use for the Hunting Horn. But of course every build out there has pros and cons. The biggest pro for this build is its damage output, both in terms of raw damage and especially elemental damage, meaning that you can easily power down an Alatreon. On top of that, it has quite a few quality of life skills, thanks to having Evade Window, Blight Resistance, Health Boost, Horn Maestro and more. It all makes the hunts feel a little bit more easier than they are. And then finally, for the pros, is the True Dragon Vein Awakening buff itself, providing us a ton of extra DPS for simply having our weapon drawn. But on the flip side, there are cons. The two major ones for this build include the True Dragon Vein Awakening health drain, which can leave us at risk, and which is one of the reasons why this build is called the risky build. This can be alleviated slightly with the health regen augmentation. And the other con is, unfortunately, this build sometimes has sharpness issues. This again is alleviated by Protected Polish, but it means you're going to have to sharpen a fair few times during an Alatreon hunt. But regardless, it's quite surprising how effective this build was at taking down Alatreon. So long as you're making use of echo attacks and you know the monster's attack patterns, this can easily take down Alatreon. Which brings us on to the next build, which is the safe Anti-Alatreon Hunting Horn build. This build eliminates any of the health drain aspects found on the risky build to provide you with a strong build with decent songs and decent raw and elemental attack. So for this build you'll need the Kaiser Crown Beta, the Brachydium Male Beta, Kaiser Van Braces Beta, Kaiser Coil Beta and the Brachydium Grease Beta. I'm also using a Blaze Charm 5 as we are using a fire weapon, and for my weapon I'm using the Safi's Hellhorn. This is the Safi Jiva Fire Hunting Horn. The awakened abilities on this weapon include increasing the weapon sharpness, increasing the elemental up, and giving it attack melodies free. As for the augmentations, again I've gone for a health boost augmentation and elemental up augmentation. Again, the specialist tools are down to personal preference. So when it comes to the jaws, you've got a fair few to play around with. First of all, I've gone for a Blaze Jaw to max out the fire attack of this build. Of course, as always, if you were using a different weapon with a different element, you would replace this to match whatever new element you were using. I've then gone for Vitality Jaws for health boost, Resistor Jaws for blight resistance, Expert Jaws for some critical eye, Challenger Jaws for the Agitator skill, a Sonorous Jaw for Horn Maestro, and then the Jaws on the mantles include Attack Jaws and Protection Jaws again. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which would be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables. You have a raw attack of 1197 with purple sharpness. You have 45% base affinity, which can be 100% when you're taking into account weakness exploit and the agitator buff. You have a fire rating of 640, and you'll have quite a few decent songs, including an attack boost, defense boost, health boost, self-improvement and impact echo waves. As for the defense, you have an okay defense of 1029 that is strong against fire, thunder and dragon, but unfortunately weak to water and ice. As for the skills, you have critical eye at level 7, increasing the base affinity of this build. You have agitator at level 7. Normally agitator can only go to level 5, but with this build we get it to level 7, increasing our raw attack and affinity even more. You have health boost at level 3, blight resistance level 3, weakness exploit at level 3, blast attack at level 2, a byproduct of the armor we're wearing. It does nothing for this build whatsoever. You have Horn Maestro level 2, heat guard level 1, another byproduct of the armor, but prevents any damage when we're in hot areas such as the lava zones in the Guiding Lands or Elder's Recess. You have latent power level 1, another byproduct of the armor, which is a buff that kicks in after you've been fighting a monster for a set amount of time, or you've taken enough damage from a monster. When the buff kicks in, it will give us increased base affinity as well as reduced stamina consumption. And when we're wearing our mantles, you have attack boost at level 2, increasing the raw attack of this build, and divine blessing at level 2 again. As for the set bonuses, you have two of them. First of all is Teostra's Technique Master's Touch, which prevents any sharpness loss when we crit a monster. And as this build should be able to reach that 100% affinity quite easily, it means that we should be able to keep the purple sharpness, even though we only have a small amount of it, for the duration of this hunt. And finally you'll have the Brachydius Wheel, Agitator's Secret, which allows the Agitator skill to get from level 5 to a maximum of level 7. So there we have it, that is the safer Anti-Alatreon build I tend to use with the Hunting Horn. But even this has pros and cons. Again, its biggest pros are both its raw attack and elemental attack. In all honesty, this build has higher raw attack than elemental attack, but that's not always a bad thing. It still has enough elemental attack to power down Alatreon at least once during each phase, and this combined with the raw attack means that we should be able to finish the hunt quite quickly, at least for the hunting horn. On top of that, this is a build that doesn't have to worry about sharpness whatsoever. This is thanks to having the high affinity and especially Master's Touch skill, meaning that we should see next to no sharpness loss whatsoever. And then finally, when it comes to the pros, is that this build actually comes with quite a few decent melodies and songs that not only benefit you, but your entire hunting party. When I was playing solo though, I mainly used the attack increase melody as well as the self-improvement melodies. The defense and health boost ones I didn't use too often, but they can still be useful. But unfortunately there are cons to this build. One of the biggest cons is that this build relies on weakness exploit, not only to deal out its damage, but also to reduce sharpness loss. And the other con for this build is it's a build that really kind of lacks any sort of defensive skills. Although the hunting horn isn't the most defensive of weapons, it still would have been nice to have evade window or other skills to help us avoid attacks. But even without it, this build will work absolutely fine against the Blazing Black Dragon, being able to easily power it down and finish the hunt quite effectively. So there we have it. Those are two builds that I can recommend for taking on Alatreon with the hunting horn. Now of course, as you farm the monster more and more, you'll get Alatreon gear and weaponry, which have high elemental ratings and defenses, which will allow you to take on the hunt a little bit more easily. But until then, these builds will work just fine. So until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you Anti-Alatreon Builds for the hunting horn in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Hope you enjoyed the little video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.